This podcast is a member of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts and content creators, visit bio.link/Red5.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Come to you, as always, from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful eyes of the Galactic Empire. My name is John Martali, and joining me, as always, is my co-host,
Garrett K. Jones.
That's right. Yes. No. All right. Well, once again, we had a plethora of Star Wars this week, and we're here to talk about Bad Batch episode, was it 13? 13. And I'll be honest, I'm still not sure exactly how I feel about this episode. I mean, I understand. Okay, let me go through. First, let me just give my initial kind of thoughts, and then I'll talk about what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it. So I understand that I get, after having such a heavy episode last week, to have one that's not quite as heavy, a little more of an adventure of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I get that. I get, wanting to kind of not do something as heavy, something, where the stakes aren't quite as high. They didn't feel quite as high. Didn't feel like, I liked, so what I liked about this episode, I liked that we're seeing a little bit of what's happening with the Batch and Sid. We see that there's a break, and we see that is probably going to lead to something. Just the way Sid kind of, her tone kind of changed, even the vocals.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of, one time you hear a glitch and her voice goes really deep and almost sinister. I definitely think that was a definite thing they did on purpose to kind of go like, to get us as the audience to look at it and go, okay, something's going to happen. Something's going to go down here eventually. And I like that for once we're going to see Omega just be a kid. For even if it's to her short time, we get to see her in a different light, other than, with the Bad Batch, kicking butt, trying to, we see her differently.
Yeah.
We see her get to be a kid. But that being said, it still felt like a filler episode. And this episode to me would have fit better if we had a longer season, and if it was a little bit further back in, other than having it be a setup for them breaking away from Sid. This felt like it should have been a couple episodes back at least. Like I wouldn't mind seeing this episode instead of the episode with them in the mines. At that point, I think that episode would have fit a little bit better then. Well, I mean, what do you think?
I honestly, with regards to this episode, I feel like, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that this is something that we should have seen a few weeks earlier. I think the audience got cheated out of getting to see the fallout with Sid and the Bad Batch, because that was something that's been building for several episodes. And when we had that two-parter where they were mining for that ore and she left them stranded,
mm-hmm.
There should have been something there where they had a follow-up on that. There's been no follow-up for 2 weeks now. Yeah. And the only thing we get is this decision that happened off screen. And we're only seeing the conversation after the fact. And it's like, when did they make this decision? When did they do anything about this? What prompted all this? because I mean we've seen the buildup, but then we have no payoff.
Yeah, I mean there was a line I do remember where Hunter made a comment about maybe it's time to break ties with Sid.
Right.
But nothing was ever, you never see that officially done. And it looks like from what Sid said, it sounds like they've been on the run or for quite a while. Because she said it's been several rotations.
Yeah,
And
but
I can't remember how many rotations.
could be a couple days, a couple weeks. It's really
I take the idea of a rotation is one rotation around, or if you take this rotation as, let's say, Coruscant is what they use as the base for the entire galaxy. So
Right.
one rotation of Coruscant, of the planet Coruscant around its sun, is one rotation. So if you take a rotation as a day, so 30 rotations would be 30 days. That's how I take it. Is they have a base where they say like, okay, this is what we're going to use the entire galaxy for telling time, and this is, so one rotation is 30 days. So
yeah, it gets a little muddy when you're dealing with multiple planetary systems.
yeah. That's why you almost have to take like, yeah, it does, but you just have to kind of stuff like that. You just have to kind of, not necessarily use your imagination, but
take with a grain of salt.
Take it with a grain of salt and just kind of, I admit that, oh, hey, this is science, this is fantasy. It works because it has to work.
Yeah, it does. And that was kind of the interesting thing about it, is that we had, I don't know. I was kind of like, I was left with this feeling of that's it. I mean, like, yeah, they dealt with a huge tsunami.
Yeah.
But that was,
I think it would have been an interesting thing to do. And it would have been and I understand why they didn't, because, as much as they show, people getting killed, even in modern Clone Wars, now that the post Disney era of Clone Wars, they shy away from kids getting killed for somewhat, especially in the cartoons. But if that friend Omega would have died in the tsunami, that would have been an interesting story, because that would have then Omega would have had to deal even more with death, because even though she's seen people killed, probably, she's never seen someone that she has a connection to.
Exactly. And so it cheapens the character growth.
Yeah. And, especially, and I think the better ending would have been, you get done with that, and then you see a Star Destroyer show up.
That would have been cool.
That would have been like fun. Because the Empire's coming. You have a feeling this can't last. Yeah. And that's always going to be in the back of Hunter's mind, is no matter where they go, this can't last.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I think is really lacking in this season, is that they have allowed Disney to kind of dictate terms of what they want to generate with this storyline. And so they're playing it safe, and in playing it safe, they're not writing characters or plot points that would actually make sense for what the characters are supposed to be dealing with.
Yeah.
And that's really frustrating for me, because and I get, don't kill characters, because that's Disney's bread and butter, but not a single person on that island, on that planet, died.
Yeah.
No one. They all made it in plenty of time.
Yeah.
To get away from the tsunami.
Yeah, and there are so many things. I'm like, when they say we have to go we're going to have to go door to door. I'm like, how many? Is there like only 20 people on this island? How many?
Yeah. It's like, I mean, but then you look at the aftermath, and you've got the population of Guam all hanging out in this courtyard together.
Yeah.
Getting the high ground. And it's like, there's more high ground than what Obi-Wan had. And
yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like the audience, the fans got cheated on this episode. I would have liked to have seen more being done with it. But it was good. I'm curious to see. We've got 3 episodes left. I'm curious to see what
that's the thing. I didn't think it was necessarily a horrible episode. I thought that you saw, you're seeing once again, you saw a little bit more character growth from Tech. Mm-hmm. I loved the fact that when what's her name made the comment about, do you think there's, she says something to Hunter about, in relation to Omega about, do you think there's, do you think she deserves more or something like that? And Tech made the comment basically like, what do you mean? What else is there? I mean, I love that little bit of a character thing from him, of him being the one to be like, what do you mean? What else should she want? Like, look at us. And then even Tech making the joke of when they're at the dinner, and he says something to the effect of, "I will note the date and time." A very ironically a very Vulcan Mr. Spock joke. I could see, which, I mean, he basically is the Bad Batch's Mr. Spock.
Yes, yes, he is
in more ways than one.
He very much is. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's what's interesting is, just looking at the characters. I mean, I think the characters are being consistently written. That's fine.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing is a lot more Omega-centric stories than we did even in the last season, where she is kind of like the crux of what's happening. Like, things happen because she goes and does something.
Yeah.
Or she makes a choice about something, or she breaks a rule, or whatever. Yeah. And it feels very much in line with Kathleen Kennedy's whole "the Force is female" thing.
Right.
And it's like, why can't we haven't had a single Hunter-centric episode?
That is very true.
We haven't seen an entire Wrecker centric episode. Yeah. The most that we've got as far as centricity has been a couple of Tech-centered episodes, 2 Crosshairs, and the rest have been Omega, and that's it. I would like to know more about Hunter. I want to see what makes him tick. I want to see the things that pushes buttons, the things that keep him up at night. I want to know what those things are. I want more character development, other than the fact that this guy's Rambo.
Yeah.
Because even Rambo was a more well-rounded character in First Blood. Wrecker seems like a simple character, but he's way smarter than he lets on, and maybe that's a front that he puts on because that's what people expect from him. Because
I mean,
I would like to see more done with these characters that flesh them out a little bit more. I mean, don't get me wrong, Omega's a cool character, but we've got an entire ensemble of characters that we can't just treat like clones simply because they're clones. They all have their own personalities, and we're not seeing enough of that.
Yeah. I mean, even to that point, we lost one. We didn't. I mean, we lost one character. He didn't die, but with
Echo.
With Echo, I mean, even though we saw quite a bit of him in Clone Wars, we really lost him before we could really get to know him as far as where he fit in with the Bad Batch.
Right.
What did he bring to the table that like Tech didn't? What were the things that he was able to do that Tech wasn't? Because they seem very similar. Maybe that's why they said
if you look at those 2 characters, they're complete dichotomy. You have Tech, he's fully human, more or less. I mean, he has all of his parts, and he acts like a robot. But then you have Echo, who has been, cyberized. He's part cyborg essentially.
Yeah.
And he's more human than the rest of them.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really interesting because those 2 characters alone, I think, would make for a great series by themselves. But we have what we have, and we have to pay attention to that.
I'm wondering if next episode, I definitely think next episode, because it seems like they're doing, especially when it comes to, the batch itself, these kind of 2 to 3 episode arcs, where they're doing like 2 episodes that kind of tell a story, then they move on.
Yeah.
Within the, and I'm wondering if next episode we're going to see, the Empire show up, and we really see, because it seems like and I think I mentioned this last week, other than that initial episode where they're trying to steal Dooku's war chest,
Yeah.
they really haven't ran into the Empire that much.
No, they haven't.
You had that one and the episode with the Zello Beast.
Yeah.
But
they should have had way more interaction with the Empire.
Yeah. And and I don't know if that's showing that, okay, they're kind of on the run. They're trying to avoid as much contact with the Empire as they can, and just kind of they're trying to stay in the outer rim as much as they can, trying to stay out of.
That makes sense because they're on the run. Yeah. There's a lot of places to hide out there.
Yeah, and they're not actively trying to fight the Empire.
Yeah.
What's
interesting, though, is if you paid attention to this episode, they have finally shed off their original armor. Aside from their helmets, for the most part, because if you look at Tech, you look at Wrecker, you look at Hunter, they're all wearing armor that was not their original armor at the beginning of the season. Because they were in disguise during that last job at the beginning of the episode. Yeah. And so instead of changing out of that armor, they're still wearing it.
Sorry.
So,
it was my daughter. She's. Anyway,
so,
go ahead.
I was going to say, but speaking of interesting stories, I want to say that this episode has probably stronger writing than the Star Wars book that I'm listening to right now. So with Jedi, the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, it's Jedi Survivor coming out at the end of April. They have a new tie-in book that is released, and it's supposed to take place between the 2 games, and it follows the crew of the Stinger Mantis, so Cal Kestis and all those characters, and it starts off as kind of an interesting thing. And one of the things I like about it is that it does use sound effects from the franchise. It uses music, it uses the blaster fire, it uses the lightsaber effects, the rumble from the Force, but the story on this is really kind of weak. It's very it's not as centered on Cal Kestis, who should be the primary character. It's centered on another side character that was introduced in the game, which is cool. We get it's fleshing her out just a little bit more, but it doesn't feel like so much. It feels like the author doesn't know the characters, doesn't know the franchise, and is inserting a lot of identity ideology into the storyline. Like the way that the games set things up is that Cal Kestis and Night Sister Marin, who shows up towards the last third of the game, like they kind of set it up where she would be kind of a somewhat love interest for him, maybe. But then in this one, they're introduced to this Imperial turncoat who is trying to get out of the Empire, and she's a non-human, which is weird because the Empire mostly got rid of non-human employees. And apparently Marin is like falling all over her. And it's just like, it's really obnoxious. Like they're on mission. They're on Hosnian Prime. I'm only 7 chapters into the book, but I'm like, this is kind of weird. And then like the recording quality is not great. Like there's I know you have to have room tone in your audio recordings, but there's like this hum that's just hanging in the back of the recording, and it's really noticeable. Which is problematic for me, but I'll get through it. I'll give you a full report on it as soon as I'm done with the book.
Definitely. What I found this interesting, I did a poll on our Twitter page at War of the Stars 1, and I asked, with Bad Batch Season 2 winding down, how would you rate this season? And I gave better than last season, on par with last season, it's okay, and it's horrible. Those were the choices. 48% said it was better than last season.
Really?
That's after 23 votes. We still have 12 hours left. 22%, it's a tie for second with 22% both said it was on par or it's okay. So those, and 9% said it's horrible.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think I did think that was very, very interesting. I want to talk a little bit while we have a couple minutes. And maybe this is just me looking in the wrong place, but it seems like I'm seeing with a certain amount of the fan base, somewhat of a backlash against Favreau and
Dave Filoni.
Because it seems like a lot of what they're doing is setting up for what we'll see in the sequel movies. They're setting the stage, especially The Mandalorian. You're seeing that being set up. You're seeing small things in here being set up. To kind of
like reinforce the sequels.
Yeah, like you're seeing, like especially The Mandalorian, you're starting to see
the cloning stuff coming out.
The cloning stuff, but also the kind of formation of the First Order, and that's starting to come in. And I know there are so many people who just could not stand the sequels, vehemently hate them, wish they would be retconned. But then you're seeing not only being not being retconned, but then
decisions being reinforced.
And I'm seeing a certain branch of the fandom, that at one point we're singing the praises of these two, suddenly turning on them vehemently.
Well, and this is coming from my encounter with how the last episode played out for Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Mando, this season has been kind of weird. Like the tone of it has just been kind of all over the place. Because like the first episode, nothing really happens, but there's some decent action. Second episode, great action, great storytelling, and it gives you a little bit more characterization into Mando's mindset and Bo-Katan's. Yeah. This third episode is, don't get me wrong, the writing was great. I thought the setup of what happened with Dr. Pershing was interesting.
Yeah.
But we did not need an entire episode. I mean, it was a 56-minute runtime.
Yeah.
The bulk of it
was
focused on that. And the only thing that we got with Mandalorian was at the beginning and at the end of the episode. It bookended everything else. And it's like it's starting to veer off into Book of Boba Fett territory, where the main title character is not getting the screen time he's supposed to be getting. And because we had 2 episodes out of 7 in Book of Boba Fett that were devoted strictly to Mandalorian. And Grogu.
I'm hoping it doesn't go that route. One thing, and I've watched a couple of videos breakdowns where they talked about this, but are you noticing the biblical kind of storylines with this? The kind of, where it seemed like the first 2 seasons were very Western, especially season 1. This one seems to be very, you have a baptism. You basically have 2 baptisms.
There's definitely a much more spiritual vibe.
And someone translate when Din hands the armor, that piece of rock that was had the carving, that someone translated that's actually a verse from the book of Exodus.
Right, and I saw that same translation. I was going to just bring that up, and it's talking about the plague of locusts.
Yeah. And I mean, you're just seeing this, and the idea of, obviously, the Din's group of Mandalorian beings, basically very cultish.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see, is Bo just, there just because it's like, well, I need to lay low for a while, but I don't really believe this, or is she a true convert?
What's interesting is it's hard to say because now she technically is owed the rights to the Darksaber because of how things played out. Like that droid that captured Din Djarin defeated him, weakened him, technically became the possessor of
the Darksaber.
Yeah,
it's gonna be interesting. Yeah,
because it was a creature inside of a droid mech suit, basically.
Which was so cool. Oh,
it was kind of cool.
Like that gave me definite General Grievous vibes.
Yes, but she defeated that entity. Technically, at this point, she should be the possessor of the Darksaber.
Yeah.
So
it's gonna be it'll be interesting to see how they play that out.
Yes.
I
am gonna stick with Mando for at least through the end of the season, but we'll see how it plays out because if it for me it feels like it's starting to veer downward in its trajectory. This last episode was the lowest rated of the entire series so far, and that kind of concerns me.
I will say this: I mean, I knew they were coming because we see them in the trailer, but still, I geeked out when I saw the Interceptors. That is still one of my favorite versions, TIE variants. I love the TIE Interceptor, and just seeing them fly, I was like, oh, that was so, yeah.
It was very cool.
Yeah, and even when you see them in the cockpit in the old school, yeah, it was
very cool.
I mean, and even that, you say what you want about the middle part of it. That dogfight at the beginning was just it was good.
It was well choreographed. It was well shot. It was good pace, and then all of a sudden we're back on Coruscant. And why?
Yeah. I mean, it was cool to see Coruscant again and to see it post Empire. I did like that. I did like seeing like what's happening in, I don't know if we needed as much of it as we did. I think maybe we could have done, if you're going to have a 56-minute episode, maybe do, if you want to go back and forth and do like, 10, 15 minutes on Coruscant to set up something going on there, then go back to what's going on with Mando and Bo, Well,
I think with like the main plot point, like if they had just focused on Mando and Bo joining up the convert, or the covert, then it would have been a much shorter episode. I don't think they had planned that far in advance because they had pre-written the script and that part of the story. So we'll see how it plays out. I am looking forward to this next episode because it's being directed by Carl Weathers, Grief Karga himself. And so I've seen some other TV episodes that he has directed in the past, and he's actually good behind the camera. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Definitely. All right. Well, Garrett, why don't you tell the fine people out there where they can find you at?
You guys can find me on Instagram and Twitter at GKJ_publishing, where I post about my books. I post about my YouTube channel, which is called GKJ Publishing. On that channel, I have a show called The Right Way, where we talk book recommendations. We have author interviews. I just did my 200th episode this last Saturday with an interview with Jonathan Mayberry, who's worked for Marvel and has done all sorts of really cool stuff. I do writing tips on world building this season. This coming Saturday, I have a live stream on Instagram, and then and then a week from that, on April the 1st, I have a spring preview of everything I have coming up for the rest of the season up through the end of July, as well as the author showcase for my April month-long author interview marathon.
All right. Well, as always, you can get hold of us through our email. That is warofthestars1@gmail.com. As I mentioned earlier, that is also our Twitter handle at warofthestars1. Check us out there. We do all kinds of cool little polls and Q&A, stuff like that. Also be looking on our Spotify page. They have a new system there where we're able to ask questions and do polls on Spotify. So if you follow us on Spotify, look for that too. Also be looking for in the next couple of weeks, a new donate button on Spotify. You can donate money directly through there to us. And we'll be setting that up. As for now, you can, if you want to support the show, you can do that through Patreon, patreon.com/War of the Stars, or go to our Spreadshirt shop and just search War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. We are, as I mentioned earlier, we are on Spotify, wherever fine podcasts are heard. You can check us out there. Also, check out my other show, Star Wars Through the Eyes of a Child, where me and my daughter Lily are going through a chronological order to watch the Clone Wars. We just published our latest episode just a couple weeks ago, less than a week ago. A lot of fun watching the episode Rookies in the Clone Wars. Really good episode. Really, really good episode. We took about a month break, but now we're back and we're going to try doing as much as we can, an episode a week of that too. But that's on our YouTube page, War of the Stars, the Star Wars podcast. It's on there. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yeah. With that being said, remember, this is not just my Star Wars. This is not just your Star Wars. This is our Star Wars. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
Force be with you.